Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today is going to be very special. We have Anna from IBM Ventures. Anna, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Anna, I like to start always the same, which is asking, what was your journey into corporate venturing?
My journey was not by any means a straight line. I'm from Brazil originally, and I left Brazil wanting to be an academic scientist. I ended up at MIT as my first job. I had no idea what I was doing, but I found the tech transfer office there. I didn't know what it was, but I fell in love with this idea of how do we translate science from lab to market? How do we think about the scientific knowledge and translate that into something that people can consume or use? So I've been doing that for 18 years, but from MIT, I ended up going to a startup that spun out of MIT. And I love that. I was doing strategy and how do we increase the applications that startup was focused on. And then eventually I ended up making my way into the dark side and corporate. So I ended up at GE Ventures. And it was the culmination of all of the different jobs that I've had in the past. So the lab to market, building companies, to being in one company and helping scale, and then going to GE Ventures to really start working with founders and help them scale and grow. So that was basically my journey. And then many of the viewers may know GE was going through a lot of trouble a few years ago. So GE Ventures ended up breaking up, and I was, a casualty out of that amazing group.
Yeah. High-performing group.
Super high-performing group, but I learned a lot. I was there for 3 years, and that was really gave me the foundation of not only venture capital, but corporate venture capital and how to work with the mothership. So I ended up at IBM, and it wasn't until last year that I actually made my way back into corporate VC and into IBM Ventures.
Okay. I think I want to ask about tech transfer. With everything you've learned since,
Yes.
is there anything you wish you had known about tech transfer? Because sometimes it feels like art and science. What it is that you wish you knew now that you've gone through this journey?
Why don't we start with the problem? So a lot of challenges that tech transfer professionals encounter is you have a solution, and some academic researchers are actually really good at understanding real world applications, and they'll start with a problem. Like Bob Langer, for example, one of the most prolific academic entrepreneurs from MIT, that's how he starts. So back then, I wish I had a better grasp and understanding, because we spend a huge amount of time trying to find the problem that fit with that solution. And that's sometimes a big waste of time, because you spend a lot of resources of people trying to find an ultimate licensor or owner for that technology.
Now let's talk about your time as a startup building a solution.
Yes.
How does that make you a better investor?
So understanding the pain points, right? Sitting as a builder, working in a startup, it's really hard. You have to wear many hats because you have very limited resources. Your funding needs to go very far. And a lot of times you have a conviction in your vision, but as you're doing the product market fit and you're testing and you're talking to clients out there, you have to pivot. So as an investor, specifically in the CVC space, is understanding those barriers and how can we as a CVC help those founders break down those barriers very early. So how do we help them connect with clients so they get an early signal? Are they in the right path? Are they solving the right problem?
I love it. I think there's a golden nugget. Actually, if I think about IBM, you have an amazing CEO. It feels like maybe it's not as complex from different functions, different focus, right?
Yeah, IBM has also gone through a lot of changes throughout its history, especially in the last couple of decades. But the one thing that has been very consistent and has helped from a CVC perspective too is the clarity when it comes to our strategy. IBM is very focused. So we're an AI hybrid cloud company, and we're extending now in terms of the future of computing, looking at quantum computers. And that clarity and focus not only has really propelled IBM in the last few years in terms of performance, we've been doing really well, but it also certainly helps from a CVC perspective.
Yep.
We're strategic. Where do we focus on? If we have many different things that we need to focus on, really, what's the priority? What are the areas? Either you have to have a very large team, so a lot of resources, or you need to define your priorities and what are the areas that you can support. This very strategic focus in AI, hybrid cloud, and quantum computing, it makes our job as investors a little bit easier.
I can see how that clarity, being very cogent about it, helps you to know where to invest, where to learn, how to bring back the learnings. But I want to now go into you joining IBM.
Yes.
So you didn't join the CVC first.
Correct.
What was your role at IBM before you joined the CVC, and how did you get into the CVC?
So it was actually a 3-step journey
Okay.
at IBM. So when I was leaving GE Ventures, I was really sad to leave that team, to leave that role. And I was trying to find something very similar. So there is this opportunity for me to join IBM Research. Well, I don't know if people know, but IBM Research is still one of the very large research organizations that focuses on fundamental technology development. And we focus on what's next in computing. And this position was to work with the next big thing for IBM and helping think about lab to market strategy. And, we start investing in research really early on, and some of those projects end up being not strategic to IBM. And if they're not, if they don't fall under that bucket, we need to figure out what to do with it. And so my team there was responsible for finding a path to commercialize those technologies, either through joint ventures, spinning out these ideas into new companies, or just divesting. So I was there for about 6 to 7 years. And last year, because we were doing a lot of work, especially on the strategy side and on the deal side, that were very complementary to our corp development. So under CHQ, my team actually merged with corporate development. So that's how I actually ended up under Ventures. So I found my way back organically,
Okay.
yes, into that team.
Now let's talk about IBM Ventures a little bit, which is how big is it, what the portfolio looks like, what the strategic remit is.
As I mentioned, we're the strategic investment arm for IBM, looking for amazing, visionary founders working at the intersection of enterprise AI. And when I talk about AI, that's very broad. So we're looking at the entire stack. And we also look at quantum computing. In quantum, we're much more narrow. We're really looking at the software layer. So that's about our investment thesis. In terms of how big we are, we're a balance sheet fund. So we have announced $500 million that we invest in AI and quantum. We have about, I'd say, close to 30 active portfolio companies. But our biggest differentiation, which I think the best CVCs out there are really spending a lot of time, and you've talked about it too, is how do we support our founders, portfolio companies, and how do we help them scale and grow? So we call it the Capital Plus model. We all know as CVCs that we can be bottlenecks because we're the corporates, we're slow. From an IBM Ventures perspective, we try to break down the barriers and actually be fast and work with our founders in their timelines because we understand the world's moving very fast, especially in AI. So how do we break down those barriers? How do we connect those companies with the IBM machinery to help those companies scale and grow through joint go-to-market activities, OEMing, and really helping them connect with whether IBM as a client or a partner or with IBM's clients.
Okay. Now, one thing you said earlier was bringing that strategic learning back to IBM. How do you do that?
So we do it in several ways. One, we're well connected with the leaders across the company. We sit under the CFO of the company. So sharing the knowledge, whether it is through meetings with the leadership and just informally talking to them about what we're seeing in the market, or writing some memos, putting together our thoughts on specific topic that we see out there. And I think one of the biggest value proposition from a CVC to the mothership is being that antenna out there and understanding where the world is going and bringing that outside in view. And not only being directed in terms of here are the areas that we're interested in, and we'll support them, but it's being proactive about looking at some themes that we see as potential disruptive in the next 2, 5, even 10 years. We're talking about quantum computers. So how do we see that? What's happening in the market? And then bringing that knowledge, again, through memos. We like to write short-ish memos.
What is shortish?
A couple of pages. I'd say 2
Okay.
to 5 pages. So
Okay.
it's not overwhelming. And if they want to have more deep dives, we can go into that. But it's really how do we distill information into a way that a leader of a business typically only has the attention span of maybe 5 minutes,
Yeah.
can read through it and identify, is this something that I want to learn more? Is this something that, okay, I'll put in the back pocket, or okay, learn, good, let's move on to the next thing. We also have monthly newsletters that we send across the businesses and the leaders. And usually that one is very condensed. So those ones are, what are we seeing? Quick snippets of what we see in the market. And we have a very short little paragraph about what's happening. And if you want to learn more, let's schedule a call. Let's talk more
It's
about
a call for action in a way.
It's a call for action, exactly. We want them to be engaged. And then the third way that we do it, so we do in different sizes. It's really big reports. So those we usually do twice a year. And we have an AI specific report, and then we have a quantum specific report.
And yet, I feel like, so this is where we're also maturing as a CVC, we're trying to become more opinionated. So if I think about your memos, your newsletter, this big deep dive, what's the kind of efforts share you have between them? And I'm thinking about the audience who are thinking about, oh, this could be all good, but how do we distribute efforts between them?
So we have a small team that is dedicated in doing the strategic work. So there's a lot of signals. So if we look at our team, so we have the investment team, we have the portfolio development team, and we have, say, the operations, strategy, and strategic partnership. And they all need to be interconnected. We all need to exchange information, and we do that. We have Friday meetings, which is dedicated to sharing. What have we seen? What do we talk about? What have we learned? And we sit down, and this is driven by the operations strategy in collecting all those views.
And it's typically weak signals, not the very obvious signals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a weak signal. Sometimes it's we went to a conference and we talked to 10 different people, and somehow they're talking about AI and robotics. And is that a signal? Is that becoming a major focus from an investment perspective? And we've learned that in the last couple of months, and we'll go to PitchBook, and X $1 million has been invested in that space. So it's a quick one for us to either get attention from somebody and say we're interested, or even for ourselves to say, wait, maybe this is an interesting topic for the next dive.
I want to talk about the team now, because you mentioned 3 teams, the investment team, the portfolio, and the operations. I think the investment team is fairly clear, but can you speak about the other 2 teams, what they do and what makes them special?
So the portfolio development team, in nature, they are our concierge for our founders, but even more than that, it's not just helping them navigate IBM, is really trying to unlock opportunities. So they know IBM really well. They're really well connected with the stakeholders. They have an internal network and an external network. And they spend a lot of times also bringing our portfolio companies into events, whether they are IBM-led events, and we bring them and we put them on stage, or with other partners. So the portfolio team was at the Montgomery Summit a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week, 2 weeks ago. And we host this big breakfast. We bring the portfolio companies, we put them on stage. So the idea is not only using the IBM machinery, but also our partnerships and the access that we have to
The full
ecosystem,
platform.
the full platform. So that's their focus. The operation strategy side, it's a lot that falls under that bucket. So one, it's really on the logistics and like how are we creating reports on how we're doing as IBM Ventures team, reporting to our leadership, is making sure that things are running operationally well. But it's beyond that. It is the insights. So it's creating the reports, is making sure that we're well plugged in with the ecosystem and what's going on, distilling that information, bringing it back to IBM leaders. It's connecting with the IBM leaders. So we have monthly meetings with a group of IBM leaders to understand what's going on in their world, what do they care about, to share things that we know. And we also support strategic initiatives. So for example, last year we launched a partnership with the University of Chicago on quantum computing. We see this huge opportunity now to help foster an ecosystem of startups, again, building applications on top of quantum computers. But we also see, due to the maturity of the technology, there are not a whole lot of companies out there yet. We've done a mapping last year, and a lot of these startups are actually academic spin-outs because that's where the research is happening. They're still early, technical founder-led, so they still but they still need a little bit of more development from a business perspective. So we partnered with the University of Chicago to launch this accelerator focused on companies that are developing applications in quantum. So how do we provide all the resources they need in order to scale and grow there? So that falls under that team too. So there's a lot happening on the operation strategy and strategic initiatives.
It's interesting because if I think about quantum computing or quantum, very sensing and all of that, a lot comes from academics. There's a huge amount of tech transfer potential.
Yes.
This is your background.
Yes.
How much of that helps you to guide these emerging firms? How do you guide them? How do you give them advice?
So a lot in terms of the programs that we put together with the University of Chicago is looking at their program and curriculum in terms of what do founders need, but also identifying potential gaps and areas that I think could be very interesting for those founders to learn at that stage as they're spinning out of academia. And even personally, IBM Ventures, even with this program in the accelerator, we're mentoring these companies.
Very nice. Now, if you think about your time at GE Ventures, is there something you learned then that you're applying today?
Probably a lot of things. I think more specifically, and it is, I think, something that Sue Siegel did extremely well was that interconnectivity, especially with key stakeholders and being in the room. As a CVC, especially if you're a strategic investor, right? Like understanding your business, understanding your stakeholders, it's not that needs to drive your investment decisions, but it needs to be complementary. And having the buy-in is very important, at least in my opinion. And I think I've learned that from my GE Ventures days. And now at IBM, I do spend a lot of time, not only me, but the team. And of course, Emily, as our leader, spends a lot of time at building those relationships and how can we support our businesses
Very nice. Now, my last question to you is, what's next for IBM Ventures? You're already investing in the frontier technology, but how do you see IBM Ventures, the next step?
I think you're just going to see us continue to grow this new journey of IBM Ventures. We're much stronger internally. I think we're seen as a very important muscle for IBM Ventures in the community. We're growing our traction. I think our brand awareness, it's much higher than it used to be in the last few years. So for us, I think the focus is how do we continue to drive impact, continue to grow? And I don't mean necessarily with number of people. We don't need to build an empire, but how do we continue to grow our presence and make great investments?
Thank you, Anna. It was really nice.
Thank you so much. It
Thank
was
you.
great to be here.
Thank you.